You've built your map, placed your baronies, picked your banners, you have a duke with a grudge, and a castle on a hill. But when you sit down to write the politics, something feels off. Like you're inventing it rather than discovering it. And here's the truth, a barony is not a political decision. It is a logistics answer. Someone needed grain to move from a field to a fort before it rotted. Someone needed a road defended. The man who solved that problem got the land. Feudalism is just a supply chain with a crown. Once you see the math, you'll never place a castle arbitrarily again. You won't invent your map. You'll read it, you'll know exactly where the lords must be, and which ones are already dying because the logistics stopped needing them. Chapter 1. Forget the stories, the banners, the bloodlines, the ancient oaths. They are decoration. Underneath the romance, a barony is a stop on a delivery route. Nothing more. The lord did not get the land because he was noble. He got it because he solved the grain problem. And the grain problem is brutal. Grain is heavy, it rots, it grows seasonally in specific places. It is produced by people who cannot defend it and cannot move it. If the garrison is not fed, the road is not safe. If the road is not safe, the grain doesn't move. And if the grain doesn't move, the garrison starves. The system is a circle. Break one link and the whole thing collapses. To understand why, you have to understand the mathematical law of the Middle Ages, the Oxen Paradox. An ox eats roughly 10% of its cargo every 50 miles. The engine consumes the cargo. Move grain too far by cart and you arrive at the city with a very happy, well-fed ox and an empty cart. Your profit is gone. Your journey was a waste of time. This is why the 3-day rule is not tradition, it's physics. Beyond 3 days of travel, the arithmetic kills the delivery. The delivery stops making sense. And this is the engine of feudalism. The engine is a single question. How do we get food, soldiers, and information from point A to point B before the ox eats it? Every barony on your map is an answer to that question. So, when you build your world, stop looking at the king. Start with the ox. Start with the grain. Start with the road. Solve the delivery problem. And the political map draws itself. Chapter 2. If baronies are stops on a delivery route, terrain is the scheduler. You don't choose the stops, right? The geography does. The terrain creates the problem and the lord is the solution. There are 4 nodes that appear on every map. Wherever you find these features, a barony will grow. It has nothing to do with politics, but with physical necessity. The alternative is starvation or conquest. Type 1. The Chokepoint Lord. The simplest node. Any place where terrain forces movement through a narrow gap. A mountain pass, a river crossing, a coastal strait, or a single road through a dense forest. A gap creates a toll. A toll creates a collector. And a collector with an army to enforce it creates a barony. The logic is a self-reinforcing feedback loop. So merchants want to cross the pass, but the pass is dangerous. A strong man secures the route, builds a fortified way station and charges for the privilege of safe passage. Safety brings more merchants and more merchants bring more revenue. More revenue pays more soldiers provide better security and so forth. The barony grows by getting better and better at its original job, holding the door. But remember, this lord's power is not personal. It has nothing to do with his bloodline or his skill. It is entirely geographic. The past is powerful. He is simply standing in it. This makes him vulnerable. If a new road bypasses the mountain or a bridge replaces the ford, the barony dies. The flow of goods moves elsewhere and the income evaporates. His descendants will still have a title. They just won't have the money to back it up. A hollow noble in a useless castle. And that gap between an ancient name and a collapsed reason to exist is the engine for political tension. Type 2. The Surplus Lord. Some land is a factory. It's flat, fertile, and wet. It produces more food than the people on it can possibly eat. This is a surplus zone, and it is the foundation of your kingdom. But surplus is a problem. Grain is heavy, it rots, it attracts raiders who rather steal a harvest than grow one. Individually, your farmers are helpless. They cannot defend the grain, they cannot store it, they cannot move it. To survive, They need a central hub. They need a box to put the wheat in, and a man with a sword to stand in front of the box. This is the birth of the surplus lord. He builds the granary. He hires the guards. He organizes the distribution. And in doing so, he solves the coordination problem for 1,000 independent families. The granary becomes the castle, and the castle becomes the barony. Think of this lord's land not as soil, but as a caloric battery. Wheat is just stored sunlight. Every harvest is a charge. Every garrison fed, every night paid, and every road paved is a discharge of the energy. The surplus lord's entire political existence is managing this cycle, keeping the battery charged and ensuring the discharges go exactly where they are needed. But being the source of energy makes you a slave to the network. The surplus lord is the most powerful man on the map, and the most dependent one as well. He needs a river. A surplus lord without a river is sitting on a pile of wealth he cannot spend. The calories are there, but the Oxen Paradox is waiting. Every mile he moves that grain by land, the ox eats the profit. His political power, which looked enormous on paper, turns out to be landlocked and worthless. In this system, you either have a way to move your energy or you are just a target. Type 3. The Junction Lord. Where paths cross, the delivery slows down. A road meets a road meets a river meets the coast. At these points, goods must change hands. Carts become boats, boats become carts, bulk shipments are broken down, small loads are bundled up. This transition isn't magic, it requires infrastructure. You need warehouses for storage, scales for measurement, and a market square for the deal. Most importantly, though, you need an umpire, someone to ensure the contract is honored between merchants. The Junction Lord provides the neutral ground. He builds the docks, hires the waymasters, and establishes a court. In exchange, he extracts a fee from every crate, bale, and barrel that touches his soil. The logic of the junction is different from the choke point. The choke point holds the door. The Junction Lord manages a swap. And this is how a muddy crossroad becomes a town, and a town becomes a powerhouse. The Junction Lord doesn't need to produce anything. He simply needs to sit at the center of everyone else's work. In the logistics of power, there is a fundamental law. Production is finite, but flow is continuous. A farmer can only grow so much wheat. A lord with 10 times the land has a hard ceiling on his wealth, right? The caloric battery only holds so much charge. But the Junction Lord taxes the flow. As long as the roads are open and the river is high, the money never stops moving. He is the middleman of the Middle Ages. He is often richer, more sophisticated, and more vital to the king than any surplus lord. Because while others make the goods, he makes the goods move. And in a supply chain, movement equals money. Type 4. The Specialized Lord. Now, what about the lord who has fertile land but no river? Just good soil a long distance from the nearest navigable waterway, and the Oxen Paradox eating his profit every time he tries to send it to the market. The way he solves it tells you everything about what kind of barony he becomes. He cannot move bulk. Bulk is heavy and destroyed by the Oxen Paradox before it reaches anyone willing to pay for it. So he stops moving bulk. He moves value instead. He turns wheat into ale. Ale is worth more per cart than wheat, travels better and keeps longer. He turns grass into sheep and sheep into wool. Wool is worth 10 times its weight in raw grain and fits in a fraction of the cart space. He turns wool into cloth. Cloth is worth 10 times its weight in wool. Where the surplus lord is a battery storing raw energy, this lord is a factory converting that raw energy into something small enough and valuable enough to survive the trip to market. He is dependent on markets, so cut off his access to markets and his refinery has nothing to refine for. And here's the world building payoff. The Landlocked Specialists is where your world's famous products come from. The wine that only grows in that valley, the wool that only comes from those hills, the cheese that takes 3 years to age and 100 miles to reach the tables of the wealthy. These aren't accidents of geography. They are solutions to the Oxen Paradox. You have your 4 nodes, you have your delivery problems, but one variable changes the math for everyone. Water. Specifically navigable water. And more importantly, which way it flows. In the logistics of power, a river is an energy subsidy. Moving 40 tons of grain by barge costs the same energy as moving 1 ton by cart. That is a 4,000% increase in efficiency. On a river, the Oxen Paradox is a rounding error. Gravity does the heavy lifting. This means a lord on a navigable river is effectively closer to your capital than a lord in the woods 2 miles away. His grain is cheaper. His garrison is easier to supply. His response to your commands is faster. But river access is not a uniform advantage. Geography dictates a lord's personality based on his position relative to the current. The source lord sits upstream. He sits near the headwaters and the floodplains. He controls the origin of the supply chain. He deals in the raw and the heavy, like timber, ore, and the bulk of wool. Gravity works for him. He loads his cargo at the top and lets the current carry it to the bottom. But the king's authority works against the current. Sending coin, soldiers, or decrees upstream is slow and expensive. This makes the source lord well-fed and hard to reach. He can threaten to withhold supply, dam the flow, or simply ignore the messenger. Over generations, this physics breeds independence. Upstream lords are your rebels. They develop strong local identities because the king's shadow rarely reaches them. Then you have the gatekeeper lord. He sits downstream. He sits where the river meets the coast or the capital. He produces nothing. He deals in the taxed and the refined. Spices, finished cloth, information, everything the source lord produces must pass through him. He is the ultimate middleman. He doesn't need a farm. He needs a toll booth. His relationship with the king is transactional. He is impossible to go around, which gives him leverage. But he is also a hostage to the flow. If the source lord stops sending goods, or if a new canal bypasses his docks, his barony hollows out overnight. This makes the gatekeeper lord your diplomat. He is sophisticated, alliance-heavy, and desperate to stay useful. He cannot afford to be replaced. Your rebels should be upstream. Your diplomats should be downstream. And if your map has it the other way around, you have a logic problem worth fixing. Chapter 3. Nodes are only half of the problem. The other half is the space between them. The roads, the rivers, the distances. And distances have a cost. Most world builders ignore it. You can't. The Oxen Paradox is the hard limit of your world. If the ox eats the profit, the lord at the end of the road doesn't get paid. If the lord doesn't get paid, he cannot maintain his garrison. And if he cannot maintain his garrison, he stops being a lord. And this is the origin of the 3-day rule. You cannot effectively govern what you cannot reliably supply. So any territory beyond a 3-day radius from a central hub requires a sublord. So this is not a political courtesy. Keep that in mind. It is a delivery necessity. But the 3-day rule is not a perfect circle. It is distorted by the terrain, right? On a dirt road, 3 days is 60 miles. The ox is eating the cargo the entire way. Downstream 3 days is at 200 miles. The river is doing the work. Upstream 3 days is 40 miles. You are fighting the physics of the water. A river is an energy subsidy. It is a 4,000% increase of your EROI, energy return on investment. And this is why a river barony is not just better than a landlocked one. It is a different species of power operating under different physical laws. The math dictates the shape of your map. River corridors will have fewer, more powerful lords. One man can govern a massive stretch of land when the water does the delivery. Landlocked regions will be fractured, a crowded patchwork of weak local lords. And this imbalance is not a design choice. It is an inevitable result of the math. It creates a permanent structural tension. Your river lords are the powerful few, right? Your landlocked lords are weak and many. The weak many will always resent the powerful few. The powerful few will always underestimate how quickly the weak many can coordinate when their supply chains are threatened. Chapter 4. Alright, enough theory. Here's the workflow. The worksheet and a map for you to practice are available for free on my Discord and on my website. Links are in the description. If you truly want to give this a good shot, I encourage you to use the map and work along. I will not show an example because I firmly believe doing beats watching. Follow these steps to transform your map from a drawing into a system. Step 1. Mark the nodes. Before you draw a single political border, mark your terrain. Identify the 5 features that dictate human behavior. Chokepoints. Narrow gaps, passes, fords, straits. Surplus zones. Fertile, wet, flat land. Your caloric batteries. Junctions. Where paths meet. Road to road, road to river, river to coast. Logistical shadows. Fertile land far from water. You're not choosing these locations. The terrain has already chosen them. A barony will exist at every mark. Step 2. Draw the routes. Connect your batteries to your consumers. Farms to cities. Cities to frontiers. Frontiers to the capital. Where these lines pass through difficult terrain, like forests or marshes or hills, mark a logistical vacuum. These are bandit problems. Every bandit problem is a potential new barony. Step 3. Identify the shadow. Look at your logistical shadows. They are your refinery baronies. And ask, what does this territory convert? What can it refine to survive the Oxen Paradox? Grain to ale, grass to wool, wool to cloth, milk to cheese. Write the conversion on the map. This is the barony's identity. Step 4. Map the hierarchy. Apply the 3-day rule. From every hub, draw a radius. On land, 60 miles. Downstream, 200 miles. Upstream, 40 miles. Any territory outside your radius requires a sublord. This imbalance is your political map. River corridors will be governed by the powerful few, landlocked regions by the fractured many. Step 5. Assign job descriptions. Every lord must justify his existence. Write one sentence. This lord exists because problem. Like the Thornwood Road needed defending, or the Crestfall Junction needed an umpire, or the Asheville Hills needed a wool refinery. If a lord has no job, he is decoration. Delete him. Or fold his land into a barony that actually works. Step 6. Define flow personalities. Look at your rivers. Upstream are your source lords. They are independent, rebellious, and deal in raw timber and ore. Downstream are your gatekeeper lords. They are sophisticated, diplomatic, and deal in spice and tolls. The tension between them is fuel for your plot. Let it burn. Step 7. Map the loyalty. Connect your delivery functions to your vassal web. If you want to know how to do that, check this video. The delivery system and the loyalty system are the same machine. When you understand the logistics, you understand the man. You started this video with baronies on a map. Names, banners, maybe a lord with a grudge. Now you have something different. A living system. 4 lord types, each one that answers to a specific delivery problem. Caloric engine producing the surplus that funds everything. Refinery baronies converting bulk into value because the Oxen Paradox gave them no other choice. Source lords sitting on timber yards upstream, drifting toward independence by the physics of the current. And the gatekeeper lords sitting on spice warehouses downstream, surviving by making themselves impossible to go around.